So that's your seedling, huh?
We are talking Risen. This is actually a Australian low-budget science fiction movie, not a religious movie as the title may suggest. I would say this movie is definitely a low-budget equivalent of movies like The Arrival, a slow-burn, more cerebral take on an alien invasion film. It's directed and written by Eddie Ayer. Now let's discuss the plot. It focuses on a world which has experienced a strange phenomena. There seems to have been a meteor of some description which has crashed down on a somewhat rural town and has released a deadly toxin into the atmosphere which has killed the inhabitants of this small town. And the world's governments are suitably concerned, as you probably would be, so they send in a group of scientists, including this one particular female scientist who has a little bit of a drinking problem. And it seems to get even weirder when some of the inhabitants of the town seem to resurrect, hence risen, but seem a little bit off, let's just say that. And it may well be a precursor to an alien invasion trying to terraform the Earth. What will happen? Well, you'll just have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss, first of all, what I think worked with Risen. So we do see quite a few low-budget science fiction movies, but I think it's less often that we see one that tries to emulate more of the highbrow science fiction sort of things, like the movie Arrival, which I've discussed. They tend to be more low-budget, schlocky B-movies with bad CGI aliens and laser guns and things like this. This is not the case of this film. It's a slow-paced, more dramatic take on trying to be at least a more cerebral take on the alien invasion story here. Now, I think the movie starts off pretty strong with an interesting hook and a little bit of a mystery about what is actually going on. What is the the deal here with this sort of strange meteor? What is it doing? And ultimately, the people that seem to have been risen, what is their deal? What it's all about? They seem to be acting in a very strange way and for all intensive purposes appear dead, apart from they're sitting up with their eyes open. So there's quite an intriguing setup, I have to say. The movie, I have to say, is also shot fairly well. This is a low-budget film, but I think initially, maybe at least in the first act, you will be forgiven thinking this is actually a higher budget movie than it actually is, because I do feel the the photography here, the cinematography, at least initially seems like it is of a quite high quality. The movie stakes are also quite high. It's also true that in some of these low budget films they tend to be somewhat short-sighted in regards to the stakes. This one definitely has the whole of the world consequences in the story may well what have happened, and it does try to have like I said, a bit more of a thought-provoking narrative with it. Doesn't always succeed in that, which we'll come on to, but at least we have the attempt here. However, what doesn't work here? Okay, so as much as I think this movie thinks it's like a highbrow cerebral film, it really falls short on some of those logical issues that maybe have had a little bit more time to develop. This one has a number of plot holes in it and characters acting in a somewhat stupid manner. In fact, it has to be said that the bad things that may befall humanity is well down to just humans acting stupid, not declaring things that they find, not acting on advice that is given, generally doing a whole host of silly things within the movie. I don't want to go into too much because I don't want to spoil any plot points for you, but a lot of the issues here just seem to be of the character's own making, and when you're meant to believe this is the top minds in the world that are doing this, it seems a little bit hard to believe. The budget really does show through. I have to say, the first act of the movie, I think because there's less in regards to special effects, then it gets you out there down to some pretty decent photography. But when the effect shots start to arrive, I think this is where the budget really does show through, because the CGI work that we see here and some quite poor composite shots and green screen really do kind of, unfortunately, point to a very low budget film. The CGI in particular looks like it hasn't been rendered properly, and there's only kind of partial the way through, and looks kind of very basic and rudimentary. Now, I think there's going to be some issues with the acting here as well. I think the acting in the movie is a little bit of a mixed bag. I won't say that everyone does a particularly bad job, but there are some standouts here. And unfortunately, our main actress seems to be one of the most undynamic kind of performances I've seen. Now, story-wise, there is a kind of a, potentially at least, a circumstance which may kind of give you a story reason why that is. But that isn't actually revealed until much later. So we're kind of left with this woman who is our main character, who seems to literally have one expression on her face through the whole movie. It's a very, very wooden performance. And I think if they wanted to have a kind of plot point to reveal this, it would have been wise to have it a little sooner, so it doesn't look like we're sitting through a whole film with some very, very kind of stilted and wooden acting. Again, it's poor kind of planning from the kind of the filmmakers here. There are also some other performances like as well dotted around which I feel are a little bit subpar. And again, just kind of some kind of the kind of the cheapness and the budget does kind of show through with some of the kind of things like the costume designs and stuff like that. Again, it looks a little low budget. The movie is incredibly slow, and after a pretty decent first act, where I think it sets up the movie pretty well, unfortunately the narrative structure of the film does kind of fall down as the film progresses. Like I've said, I think the movie thinks that it's a somewhat cerebral film, but the plot points start to kind of be a little bit silly and ill-conceived as the movie kind of goes along. And when we get to our the third act, there are some silly things that have happened, although the movie doesn't think that it has presented it like that, but ultimately it has, and therefore becomes a slow and a dull film without really a particularly kind of coherent plot. The basics are there, but there are some things here that I think have just been kind of overlooked, as I say, a few plot holes, character motivations, or kind of lack thereof, and just some kind of silly things that you would have thought would have been a little bit more set up or guarded, things like this. Again, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but you'll kind of know what I mean when you see the film. So I think this movie could have had potential, but I think it needed to have more writers involved, or a little bit of rewrite to make kind of the narrative a little bit better. I think the filmmakers need to think a little bit about more of a narrative through line, pacing issues, and kind of giving. I know they kind of want to have reveals at the end and stuff like that, but ultimately, I think because of that, the kind of the rest of the movie suffers from it, from various kind of issues. Again, I'm trying to be vague with the spoilers here, but it's a disappointing film, not particularly interesting. The narrative is somewhat muddled and dull, so I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.